So hello, everyone. Good afternoon, good evening, konnichiwa, whatever time of day it is in your part of the world. And thank you for coming to today's discussion. Today, we are going to be talking to 5 writers from different parts of India about short pieces, fictional and non-fictional, that they have written with a sort of broad focus on the last, let's say, nearly 2 years, but not quite 2 years, during which the world has gone through this pandemic of COVID-19, when a small virus has turned all our lives upside down. And these pieces that our writers have written will be translated and published on the website of the Japan Foundation, a way of sharing literature across the borders of culture and nation and so on. As I said, the pandemic is something that people have lived through almost in the same period in real time, and with some similarities, but also with differences depending on the social, cultural, economic context of the countries that people belong to. So today our 5 writers are Sumana Roy, Soumya Rajendran, Nikhil Sachan, Benyamin, and Rashmi Nazari. We're not going to give you extensive biographical notes on any of them because that would take up all the time that we have, because they're all very, very well established, best-selling, award-winning, their books are being made into films and so on, but you will get their bios in the chat box at the side. Now, what I'm going to do is to start in a slightly unusual way, but ask each of you to introduce yourselves in 1 or 2 lines, who you are, maybe what kind of writer where you come from. I'll leave that to you, but just 1 or 2 lines, and then we'll go into the conversation. So I'm going to start with Rashmi.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, great. So I'm Rashmi Nazari, and I'm from Guwahati, Assam, India. And I'm a fiction writer, and basically I write whatever I fancy, and people think I tell lies even when I am telling the truth. So I make up stories that way. Thank you so much. I look forward to working with all of you.
That's wonderful. So we can, in our discussion, see what is lie and what is truth. Okay, Nikhil.
Hi, I am Nikhil. I'm from Bombay. I'm a screenwriter, plus I've also written 4 books. Now I'm transitioning from the world of books to the world of cinema. And I'm also writing and converting some of my books into films and web.
Okay, great. Thanks, Nikhil. And I hope you won't leave books behind too much because you have such a large following of readers as well.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Okay, so Sumana.
Hi, Urvashi and all of you. I've tried to write poems and essays and fiction as well, but if you asked me who am I would probably say I'm an aunt to a lovely nephew and niece. So that's me.
And a teacher to many fond students as well, right?
Yes, thank you.
Soumya?
Hello, everyone. I'm Soumya Rajendran. I'm a writer and a journalist. I'm originally from Chennai, but I currently live in Pune with my child, husband, and cat.
And one of many of Soumya's books, but one particular one is a household word among children. It's called My Will Not Be Silent, and that has gone into many sequels, or 2 at least, that I know of. Yes? Okay. Yeah. And Benyamin?
Hello everyone. ഞാൻ മലയാളത്തിലാണ് സംസാരിക്കുന്നത്. ഞാൻ മലയാളത്തിൽ എത്തിക്കൊണ്ടിരിക്കുന്ന എഴുത്തുകാരനാണ്. മോസ്റ്റ്ലി നോവലാണ് എഴുതുന്നത്. കഴിഞ്ഞ 20 വർഷത്തിലധികമായി നോവൽ എഴുതുന്നു. ചെറുകഥകൾ, ലേഖനങ്ങൾ എല്ലാം ഉണ്ട്. 25-ലധികം പുസ്തകങ്ങൾ പ്രസിദ്ധീകരിച്ചിട്ടുണ്ട്. ഏറെക്കാലം ഗൾഫിലായിരുന്നു, ബഹറിലായിരുന്നു ഞാൻ ജീവിച്ചത്. ഇപ്പോൾ നാട്ടിൽ കേരളത്തിലാണ് ജീവിച്ചുകൊണ്ട് ഫുൾ ടൈം എഴുത്തുകാരനായി ജീവിക്കുന്നു.
So for our listeners, that beautiful language that Benjamin spoke in is from Kerala. It's Malayalam. And Kerala is one of the few states in India which has almost pretty much 100% literacy, and where the reading culture is like a cult. So when you have a festival, every bus driver, every cyclist, everyone on the road knows which writers have come to which place in Kerala, and they all rush there to meet the writers. I'm going to turn it over to Meena, who is here with Benjamin, and who will translate for you what he said in English.
Yeah. So Benjamin sir, he is a novelist based out of Kerala and has been an author for the past 20 years, has more than 25 publications in his name. He's been in Bahrain for a pretty long time, and now he's based out of Kerala. I hope I didn't miss out anything, sir.
Thank you so much. Yeah. Okay. So then, thank you so much for your introductions, which of course, because of the rule I have laid down, don't do justice at all to the many multifaceted personalities that you are. But let me ask you my first question. So all of your pieces have in some way or the other touched upon this past 18-20 months in our lives, when the world has been turned upside down by the entry into different places of the coronavirus. And it first landed from Wuhan in India. It first landed from Wuhan in January of 2020 in Kerala. And Kerala is a state that's coped really interestingly with this. But, one of the things that has been predominant throughout this year or more has been the kind of isolation into which the epidemic or the pandemic has pushed people into their homes, which is not an unusual state of affairs for writers, because writers often write in isolation. But in some ways, and in all your pieces, you have that there is an isolation, but there is also paradoxical connectedness with a much wider community over a range of issues. So could you talk a little bit about what it has been like in terms of creativity for writers this past 20 months or so? And also, could you reflect a little on what does it mean to write at a time when people might say to you, or people might think, or you might yourself think, that when people are dying around me for this illness, what am I doing sitting at my table and writing? So what is the role of writing at a time like this? Let me start in the reverse order. So Benjamin, if you could come in and respond to whatever part of the question you'd like to respond to.
ഇത് സംബന്ധിച്ച് എനിക്ക് പറയാനുള്ള ഒരു കാര്യം എന്താണെന്ന് ചോദിച്ചാൽ, ഒരേ സമയം ഏകാന്തതയും യാത്രയും ഇഷ്ടപ്പെടുന്ന ആളാണ് ഞാൻ. അതേ സമയത്ത് ഏകാന്തതയും യാത്രയും എൻ്റെ ഇഷ്ടത്തിനനുസരിച്ച് തിരഞ്ഞെടുക്കാനും ഞാൻ ആഗ്രഹിക്കുന്നു. പക്ഷേ ഇവിടെ എന്താണ് സംഭവിച്ചത് എന്ന് ചോദിച്ചാൽ, നമ്മളെ പുറത്തു നിന്നൊരാൾ കതവടച്ച് പൂട്ടുകയാണ് ചെയ്തിട്ടുള്ളത്. യഥാർത്ഥത്തിൽ നമ്മളുടെ ഒരു വാതിൽ, നമ്മുടെ ഡോർ പുറത്തുനിന്ന് ഒരാൾ പൂട്ടുമ്പോൾ അത് ജയിലും, നമ്മൾ അകത്തുനിന്ന് പൂട്ടുമ്പോൾ അത് നമ്മുടെ സ്വകാര്യതയുമായി മാറുന്നുണ്ട്. ഇത് നമ്മൾ യഥാർത്ഥത്തിൽ ജയിലായി തീരുകയാണ് ചെയ്തത് എന്നുള്ളതാണ് യാഥാർത്ഥ്യം. അതുകൊണ്ട് തന്നെ നമ്മൾ വീടിനുള്ളിലിരിക്കാൻ ആഗ്രഹിക്കുന്ന അതേ സമയത്ത് തന്നെ നമ്മളെ വല്ലാത്ത ഒരു പ്രശ്നം ബാധിക്കുന്നുണ്ട്. ഇതിനെ എങ്ങനെ മറികടക്കും, നമ്മൾ എങ്ങനെയാണ് ഈ വാതിൽ തുറന്ന് പുറത്തേക്ക് പോവുക എന്ന് നമ്മളെ എപ്പോഴും അലട്ടിക്കൊണ്ടിരിക്കും. സ്വാഭാവികമായിട്ടും ആ അലട്ടൽ പല വിധത്തിൽ നമ്മുടെ എഴുത്തിനെ ബാധിക്കും എന്നാണ് ഞാൻ കരുതുന്നത്. എങ്കിൽ പോലും ബേസിക്കലി ഒരു എഴുത്തുകാരൻ എന്ന നിലയിൽ അതിനെ മറികടക്കാനുള്ള എല്ലാ ശ്രമങ്ങളും കഴിഞ്ഞ 18 മാസമായി ഞാൻ നടത്തിക്കൊണ്ടേയിരുന്നു. ഞാനൊരു എഴുത്തുകാരനാണ് എന്ന് എന്നെ ഓർമ്മിപ്പിക്കുക ആയിരുന്നു എൻ്റെ ശ്രമം. അല്ലെങ്കിൽ ഞാൻ ജീവിച്ചിരിക്കുന്നു എന്ന് എന്നെ ഓർമ്മിപ്പിക്കുവാനാണ് ഞാൻ എല്ലാ കാലത്തും ശ്രമിച്ചുകൊണ്ടേയിരുന്നത്. അതിനുവേണ്ടിയാണ് ഞാൻ എഴുതിക്കൊണ്ടും ഇരുന്നത്. അതുകൊണ്ട് തന്നെ അതിനു മുമ്പ് എഴുതി തുടങ്ങിയ ഒരു നോവൽ പൂർത്തിയാക്കി യുവ എഴുത്തുകാരുമായി ചേർന്ന് ഒരു പരീക്ഷണം എന്ന നിലയിൽ മറ്റൊരു നോവൽ എഴുതി, ഒരു ലേഖനങ്ങളുടെ സമാഹാരം പ്രസിദ്ധീകരിച്ചു. ഇതൊക്കെ നടക്കുമ്പോൾ പോലും നമ്മളുടെ ചുറ്റും എന്താണ് നടക്കുന്നത് എന്നുള്ളതിൻ്റെ ഒരു ആദി, ലോകത്തിന്റെ എല്ലാ ഇടങ്ങളിൽ നിന്നും കിട്ടുന്ന വാർത്തകൾ, സംഭവങ്ങൾ, ദാരുണമായ ഓരോ കാര്യങ്ങളും നമ്മളെ വല്ലാതെ അലട്ടിക്കൊണ്ടിരുന്നു. ഇതിന്റെ എല്ലാം നടുവിലാണ് ഈ എഴുത്ത് സംഭവിച്ചത് എന്നാണ് എനിക്ക് ഇതിനോട് ചേർത്ത് പറയാനുള്ളത്.
Mira?
I have to say it? Yeah.
Yes, please. Yeah.
Yes. So, Sir said that for him, he's someone who travels and who enjoys solitude at the same time. But then he liked to choose when to travel and when to be alone. And right now, he just distinguished between the concept of a jail where you're locked from outside, and as soon as we lock our doors from inside, it's privacy. He distinguished the two. And right now, through the lockdown, we were locked out by someone, asked to stay indoors. And as a writer, it frustrated him, it bothered him how to get out of this. And he constantly reminded himself that he's a writer and the fact that writing makes him alive. And he joined with a lot of young writers and proceeded to make a compilation of articles. He did all of this while the world was worrying away in the pandemic. And writing did happen for him because he made that effort throughout, a consistent effort.
Thanks, Mira. Shumana, I could see you nodding your head when Mira was translating. Do you want to come in here? Because in some ways, your piece also reflects a little on this. So,
I'll try and answer this as best as I can, Urvashi. As you probably know, being naturally very shy and reclusive, I had allowed myself to believe that my temperament sought the solitary life. It has been hard for me to explain to friends and family that I like being by myself, that I enjoy the company of those around me, even if they are not necessarily human. My bed, the furniture in the room, plant life, the elements, and various other things, not to forget the cell phone, of course. The pandemic and the consequent lockdown proved to me that I had not really known myself very well. Once, alone in my flat in Sonipat, where I teach at a liberal arts college, I touched my hair and shoulders like my mother used to when I was a child. I was feeling so alone. This was a couple of months before the lockdown. I was fortunate to be with my family during the lockdown. I saw my parents and my nephew and little niece during video call. It was the first time in my life that I began to think and worry about their mortality. All of this, of course, began to affect my writing, but more importantly, my living. For the first time in my life, I learned to pronounce what I think, the two letters correctly, the two letters of the English alphabet, the letters I and U. That when I say I am pulling the word to myself. I, hum, main, ami. When I say you, tum, tumi. And I see the letter U as, two eyes connected by a bridge, as if the feet of the two eyes were touching each other under a table. So when I say you, I am being driven by a kind of centrifugal force to reach out to the world. So that is what I wanted to record in my short essay as well. This moment of centrifugality that people like myself were feeling.
thank you. That's quite beautiful. Let me turn to Soumya. Soumya, what was it like for you, and did it force you to reflect on the writer's role at all?
So in contrast to what happened to most writers, I think for me, I lost my solitude during the pandemic because I have a 9-year-old child, and my most focused time of writing used to happen when she was away at school. So now with school shut, she's been at home all day, and I've been having to manage online school in between my job, which is that of a journalist. And I've been extremely busy managing my job, the home, and trying to find time to write in between. And I found it very distracting also to try and write fiction in this time, because I was starting to feel overwhelmed with the kind of news that was coming in. I did not have the choice of shutting it out, turning my cell phone off, or turning the internet off, because that was my job. As journalists, we are required to document everything that's happening around us. So I was finding it really overwhelming to deal with what I was seeing in the news every day. And writing as well as reading are my refuge. So I had to consciously make time for that. I had to kind of come up with, a no phone policy or a no internet policy beyond a certain time, and devote that time to reading and writing instead. So I'm quite grateful to the YOMU Foundation actually for this opportunity, because it forced me to sit down and think about the stories behind the numbers that I was looking at on a day-to-day basis, and come up with what kind of, how do people really deal with grief? When we are just looking at these numbers, we don't see beyond that. We don't look beyond the data. So this made me sit down and imagine these two characters who are stuck together at home, and what goes on between them. What is the tension between them? Something that you will never see in the newspaper. So that's where my story came from.
Yeah, thanks so much for reminding us actually of the fact that writing takes place in the real world. And so what happens in the real world really deeply impacts that. And one of the very interesting things that I found in all your pieces is that, without intending it to, because you didn't know who else was writing, the essays or the works of fiction that you've done, they kind of talk to each other. There is a way in which the issues you talk about resonate with each other. And we'll come to that in a minute. But let me then ask Nikhil, because Nikhil, your work, both in your writing, of course, with your large fan base, and working with the film, such a public kind of thing. So what was it like for you this time in terms of your creativity? Nikhil, you have to unmute.
Yeah. So I have never craved so much to write as much I craved in the pandemic, because these were the times when you realize the fragility of life. The people the people who are young, a lot of my batchmates from college, a lot of colleagues from office. When you hear a sudden news that one of them have died, I have never seen life from that fragile lens. COVID was the time when I decided to quit my job, and COVID being a big trigger for that, when I realized that life is very, very fragile. So I did quit my big corporate job. I was a banker. I decided to quit it all because I realized that the time is ticking. I have to tell a lot of stories, and I had been procrastinating. I had been taking this decision that when will I write full time. COVID was a very, very big trigger when I decided that now I have to go all out. I have to write a lot of stories, and I have to just tell the stories of hope. In fact, my fourth book that came during the pandemic. It was about a 60-year-old man who was a ticket collector at the railway station, who always wanted to go to Bombay to become a singer, but he could never go. So in that story, her daughter asks him that all your life you have been issuing tickets to various people, telling them to take their train, but when will you take your own train? You always wanted to go to Bombay, you always wanted to become a singer. So that was the story which I, wrote during the COVID times, because I was so shaken with the fragility of life, the young people dying, that I decided that now all that I will do every single day in my life would be writing and nothing else. Whatever I enjoy the most is what I'll be doing. So it has really shaped my writing a lot. I've written a lot. I've done a lot of stories, and invariably hope is a very, very big ingredient in all of those stories. And I am thankful, that during these times, a lot of people realized this. I know a lot of people who started pursuing their passions and who started, balancing their lives. But otherwise, all you do from 9 to 7 was caring about your professional life.
Thanks so much for that really moving reflection, actually. I sometimes think I would love to write more. I am like more than twice your age, and I still haven't taken the kind of resolution that you have taken to write all the time, but maybe one should. Okay, Rashmi, over to you.
Thank you, Urvashi. For me also, I can almost relate with what Soumya had just mentioned. It's been a bit different because everyone started to stay home. And I myself am otherwise a very indoors kind of person. I would like to be by myself, not exactly quiet and reticent, but yes, I am scared of the traffic, the city, and that sort of the humdrum outside. So I would prefer the quiet. But once the colleges and the offices started happening from home, it became slightly different. And at the same time, I noticed something I never had to face before, never had to deal with before. I had to take stock of depression in people, young people. I had children. I have children. My daughter, she's a doctor, and my son is studying law. So depression at that age was a bit difficult for me to handle. So normally when I write, it was to escape from something, escape from a whole lot of things, maybe pain in my own self. But this time when I wrote, I had to write to cheer them up. I had to write to escape from the overall depression, the depression which was significant in my house, and the bigger, the macro level of it was represented outside. So I saw that whenever I wrote something cheerful or something of hope, and we have this habit of sharing notes, we did, and my daughter also likes to do a little bit of writing tidbits and all. So when I did a little bit of positive writing, sharing, I could see that they were also in an uplifted spirit. So that was one thing I noticed. And then I also noticed that people from people who had no connect for so long suddenly got in touch. They would just put in a message or a mail. Hey, Rashmi, we've heard wherever you're staying, that's in a containment zone now. Are you guys fine? So that is really kind of very touching here. It is so very overwhelming. And these are the points I thought, okay, if this, I don't write it down, it will be lost forever. Or else, even if it's not lost, it will stay just between the two of us. The one who asked me, hey, Rashmi, how you doing? And me. So I wanted more people to know that we're reaching out. We're confined in our houses, but we're reaching out. It's a kind of human miracle. I had always believed that miracles were always divine, but this time on, I saw that humans were also capable of miracles, and we did it. We had been writing just like other people had been providing free oxygen cylinders, free medicines, or free food to the stranded. So I think we have done our bit by writing, because just as health workers did their awareness camps, we did our own way of awareness camping. We wrote and sent those pieces out. And it's a blessed time because we are using the internet to our opportunity, we are using it to our best of facilities. So in this way, I think we are being able to create awareness of hope, which I heard once when I was a little girl. Even medicines don't work if the mind is closed to medicines. If the mind is not receptive to prayers and medicines, the body doesn't seem to respond. So we are probably doing that work, and I think we're doing a good work. Thank you, Urvashi. Thank you, YOMU. Thank you all, colleague writers.
You are doing very good work, and I'm reminded, and this leads me to my next question, of in Benjamin's piece, he talks about this a little bit when he refers to the Wuhan diary, and he talks about how the not the word capturing, but and not even documenting, but how somehow understanding the experience of these months has been captured quite a lot in writing. And I was also thinking of that at some stage, that now, given the kind of possibilities that the internet offers to us, and the quick sharing of information, there has been a lot of really, really interesting writing which documents in some ways the experience of the pandemic. And I don't mean only in literal terms, but in many of the nuanced ways in which all of you have looked at it, looking at grief and looking at human relationships and how they change, looking at, very importantly, the intergenerational conflict, which is part of daily life, or the ethnic conflict, which Rashmi, you refer to in your piece also, and looking at the things that people are capable of. So that really brings me to my next question, that actually all of you are fiction writers and non-fiction writers, I'm guessing, and you have chosen different forms. So Rashmi's and Soumya's pieces are both fictional pieces, but Nikhil, Benjamin, and Shumana have written more narrative, documentary, reflective, nuanced pieces. What can you talk a little bit about why you chose, or how you chose, or what led you to choose the form you chose? And also what led you, and in this case, I'm thinking particularly of Nikhil and Benjamin, to write in a language other than the usual language you write in. So Nikhil, do you want to start? Muted.
Sorry, I always forgot to unmute. So I particularly chose to write non-fiction this time because there were a lot of stories this time, which were so beautiful. I can't even imagine, to such beautiful stories, because they were all around. Ironically, we were told to social distance, during these times, but I've never seen people come so close to each other as much as they came in COVID. Every single day, I've seen people in various WhatsApp groups giving lead for oxygen, giving lead for hospital beds. I've seen my batchmates from IIT, from engineering colleges. They've been working very hard to develop mobile applications, to develop websites so that, it helps everybody. So I've seen those beautiful stories around me. So I thought, rather than, making up a story, why not talk about things which are already happening? Why not talk about such beautiful people, which really moved me? I mean, I've seen people who traveled more than 1,000 kilometers to help somebody. These were so moving stories. So I decided that I will probably talk about these real stories. And these are, it's almost a cinematic climax is there in all those stories. So I thought, let's talk about these things. I wanted the world to know about these beautiful human beings. So that was the main, thought behind doing this.
Okay. And Benjamin, you?
ഞാൻ ഈ 5 ആർട്ടിക്കിളും വായിച്ചിരുന്നു. അതിലെല്ലാം ഒരേപോലെ നിറഞ്ഞു നിൽക്കുന്നത് 3 കാര്യങ്ങളാണ്. 1 എമ്പതി, 2 ഹോപ്പ്, 3 ലവ്. ഇത് 3ഉം ചേർന്നാണ് എഴുത്തുകളെ പൊതുവെ മുന്നോട്ട് നയിക്കുന്നത്, അല്ലെങ്കിൽ എഴുത്തുകാരെ മുന്നോട്ട് നയിക്കുന്നത് എന്നാണ് നമ്മളുടെ എല്ലാവരുടെയും രചനകൾ കാണിക്കുന്നത്. എന്നെ സംബന്ധിച്ചിടത്തോളം എന്തുകൊണ്ട് ഫിക്ഷൻ എഴുതിക്കൊണ്ടിരിക്കുന്ന ഒരാൾ നോൺ ഫിക്ഷനായ ഒരു ആർട്ടിക്കിൾ എഴുതിയെന്ന് ചോദിച്ചാൽ, യഥാർത്ഥത്തിൽ ഈ സമയത്ത് ഞാൻ കേരളത്തിൽ നിന്നുള്ള നേഴ്സുമാരുടെ ജീവിതത്തെ ആസ്പദമാക്കിയുള്ള ഒരു നോവൽ എഴുതിക്കൊണ്ടിരിക്കുകയായിരുന്നു, അല്ലെങ്കിൽ അത് എഴുതി പൂർത്തിയായിരുന്നു. പാൻഡമിക് സിറ്റുവേഷനിലാണ് അത് പൂർത്തീകരിച്ചതെങ്കിലും അതിന് മുമ്പ് ഒരു 3 years ബാക്ക് തൊട്ട് ഞാൻ എഴുതിക്കൊണ്ടിരുന്നതാണ്. അത് പൂർത്തീകരിച്ചപ്പോൾ സ്വാഭാവികമായും നേഴ്സുമാരുടെ ജീവിതവുമായി ചേർത്ത് ഈ കൊറോണയും പാൻഡമിക് സിറ്റുവേഷനും ഒക്കെ കുറെ പാർട്ട് അതിനകത്ത് ഉൾക്കൊള്ളിക്കുവാൻ എനിക്ക് കഴിഞ്ഞിട്ടുണ്ട്. പക്ഷേ നമ്മൾ ജീവിതത്തിൽ കണ്ടുമുട്ടുന്ന എല്ലാ അനുഭവങ്ങളും എല്ലാ ചിന്തകളും എല്ലാം നമുക്ക് ഒരേപോലെ ഫിക്ഷനിന്റെ ഉള്ളിൽ ഉൾക്കൊള്ളിക്കാൻ കഴിഞ്ഞു എന്ന് വരില്ല. അതുകൊണ്ടാണ് എല്ലാ ഫിക്ഷൻ റൈറ്റേഴ്സും അതിനപ്പുറത്ത് നോൺ ഫിക്ഷനായ ആർട്ടിക്കിൾ എഴുതാൻ ശ്രമിക്കുന്നത്. ഈ പാൻഡമിക് കാലത്ത് നമുക്ക് ധാരാളം പുതിയ ചിന്തകൾ ഉണ്ടായി വന്നിട്ടുണ്ട്. പുതിയ കാലത്തെ സംബന്ധിച്ച്, പുതിയ ബന്ധങ്ങളെ സംബന്ധിച്ച് ഒക്കെ. അതൊക്കെ നമുക്ക് റിഫ്ലക്റ്റ് ചെയ്യണമെങ്കിൽ ഒരുപക്ഷെ ഫിക്ഷന് പുറത്ത് നോൺ ഫിക്ഷനായി തന്നെ എഴുതണം എന്നുള്ളത് കൊണ്ടാണ് ഞാൻ ഈ ആർട്ടിക്കിൾ എഴുതുന്നതിനെ സംബന്ധിച്ച്, അല്ലെങ്കിൽ ഈ ഒരു പ്രൊജക്റ്റിനെ സംബന്ധിച്ച് ഞാൻ ഒരു ആർട്ടിക്കിൾ എഴുതാം എന്ന് തീരുമാനിച്ചത്. അപ്പോൾ ഉദാഹരണമായി ഞാൻ അതിനകത്ത് പറയുന്നുണ്ട്, ഈ നമ്മുടെ ഈ നെറ്റ്വർക്കുകളും സോഷ്യൽ മീഡിയയും ഒക്കെ ലഭ്യമാകുന്നതിന് മുമ്പ് ആയിരുന്നു, ഒരു 25 വർഷം മുമ്പായിരുന്നു ഇത് സംഭവിച്ചിരുന്നത് എങ്കിൽ, പാൻഡമിക് വന്നിരുന്നത് എങ്കിൽ നമ്മൾ എന്തുമാത്രം ഒറ്റപ്പെടുമായിരുന്നു. അതുകൊണ്ട് ഇത്രയും വൈകി പാൻഡമിക് അല്ലെങ്കിൽ കൊറോണ വന്നതിന് നമ്മൾ കൊറോണയോട് നന്ദി പറയേണ്ടതുണ്ട് എന്ന് പറയുന്നത് പോലെ അത്തരം ചില ആശയങ്ങൾ, അല്ലെങ്കിൽ നമ്മുടെ ജീവിതത്തെ സംബന്ധിച്ചുള്ള കാഴ്ചപ്പാടുകൾ, നമ്മുടെ ജീവിതത്തിന് ഇത്രയും വലിയ ആഘോഷങ്ങൾ ആവശ്യമില്ല എന്ന്, ഇത്രയും ആൾക്കൂട്ടങ്ങൾ ആവശ്യമില്ല എന്ന് ഒക്കെ പറയുന്നതിന് ഏറ്റവും പറ്റിയ മീഡിയ ആർട്ടിക്കിൾ തന്നെയാണ് തോന്നിയത് കൊണ്ടാണ് ഫിക്ഷൻ വിട്ടിട്ട് ഞാൻ ആർട്ടിക്കിളായി തിരഞ്ഞെടുത്തത്. അതേ സമയത്ത് തന്നെ വരും കാലത്ത് എപ്പോഴെങ്കിലും ഇതിനേക്കാൾ മെച്ചപ്പെട്ട രീതിയിൽ ഈ നമ്മുടെ ഈ കാലത്തെ അടയാളപ്പെടുത്താൻ ഒരു ഫിക്ഷൻ എഴുതണമെന്ന് എനിക്ക് ആഗ്രഹവുമുണ്ട്.
Ira?
Yeah. So Sir was saying that he read all these 5 articles and they are filled with empathy, hope, and love. And he also believes that this is what basically motivates an author to write and keep on writing. He wrote a novel based on nurses, and it took him 3 years during this pandemic time. And it took him 3 years basically to write it. But there are elements, because it got published during the pandemic time, it had elements of COVID and the issues of pandemic, all the aspects relating to it. He felt that he chose non-fiction as a form because the experiences and thoughts that that he had during this phase of pandemic couldn't just be captured through fiction. It was a little bit limiting in terms, because there were new thoughts which discussed about the new forms of relationships that were being formed as we deal with COVID, or the new world that we're exposed to, which only non-fiction, according to him, could capture the true essence of. So, and he's also saying that he's sort of thankful. Themes like that, he's thankful to Corona for coming this late when internet and technology is at its height. Because if it was 25 years ago and we wouldn't be so connected, it would have been terrible. So, and he said that themes also like life doesn't need as much festivity and crowd are things which could be conveyed better through non-fiction than fiction. But also on that note, he said that he hopes to write something based on this, a fictional book sometime in the future, capturing all these aspects.
Thank you so much. Yes, he explores that aspect of the time in which Corona has taken place and the connectivity of the world in his piece. So I'm glad he mentioned it. And Meera, you're such a brilliant translator, so sort of pithily capturing the essence of what he's saying. Thank you so much. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, so I'm going to ask Shumana now. What do you think? Why did you choose to write the, non-fiction within quotes, because it's a very reflective kind of piece. It's not documentary, but something different.
You know, the writer and editor Anjum Katyal, who invited me to be a part of this project, asked me to write an essay, or that is at least how I read the email. I should go back to it to check whether it was actually that she had written. The essay came naturally to me. I'm not a good fiction writer, and the time we are living through seems straight out of a fictional world anyway. I've noticed that humans have been writing endlessly about how the pandemic has affected them, their lives, and their livelihoods too, of course, which Nikhil has touched upon so beautifully in his essay. I wanted to write about how others besides the human have been affected and what we could take from this change that had come over them. You asked about form, Urvashi. My essay, I think, is built on the idea of centrifugality, of reaching out, a phrase I think all of us, including you, have used. So that is the form that I naturally gravitated to, because that is what I was feeling. And again, a little while ago, Nikhil spoke about how people were reaching out to strangers. I wanted to reflect that moment of centrifugality in the form itself. And, so though I'm writing about diverse threads of moss, of water, of plants, of dust, and the human heart, how they at least came together in my mind to ask one question, which was, what after this uncertainty? And it might be presumptuous of me to say this, but this is what I was aiming for, that this moment of uncertainty, we don't know what lies in store after this. I wanted this moment of uncertainty to give my essay the form that it exists in now.
So interesting that, what you're saying about people coming together, which, as you said, Nikhil's piece also refers to. This is centrally, in many ways, what both Rashmi's and Soumya's pieces are about. A different kind of coming together. In Rashmi's piece, the tribal, the ethnic separation that has happened because of the violence, and then the generational shift also comes together. And in Soumya's piece, the kind of, the internal to the family, but also the hostilities set up with the neighbor, also bring about that kind of transformation. Rashmi, would you like to talk a little about what it was like for you, why you chose to write in this particular form, why you chose fiction?
Yeah, fiction had always been my forte, Urvashi. I am most comfortable writing fiction, and whenever I write essays, it turns out to be more humorous. So I thought I shouldn't attempt humor here, because I normally write for entertainment. And when I want entertainment, I wouldn't write maybe something which again upsets you, thinking about so many depressing things. So I stuck to my forte, I stuck to fiction. And I wanted to stress on the theme that there have been things which were always around us, but we never noticed them. It took us a pandemic to open our eyes and look at them and see them and feel them the way they are. Because all along, I think they were just there and we would just walk past without seeing them. So this is exactly what I wanted to bring out in my story, in my piece. And another thing is, my stories are normally the kind which I would like to read out to children, or people who are probably not as grasping as, allow me, it might not be correct, but allow me to use the word intelligent. People who are simple peasants in the village, maybe who have just studied till about class 2 and class 3. So I would like my stories to reach out to them and narrate to them, sit down with them and tell them stories. So these are the stories. Back in my ancestral village, there had been this ethnic riot during the late 1990s, and then there had been spurts later on, 2-3 occasions again. So the Santals and the Boros, I come from the Boro community of Assam. So the Santals and the Boros, they were a beautiful people, two very beautiful people. They have lived their lives together. They have celebrated festivals and births and weddings. So these two people had been torn apart after the riots. But I'd seen that even otherwise, if we don't generalize the difference, there still are people, there still are friends who in the closeness of their houses, they would still meet, they would still talk. And despite the pandemic, I think this was it, that people who were not supposed to meet, one an infected person maybe, and the other a healthy person, they were not supposed to meet, but somehow they were reaching out through their prayers and through their goodness. So I think there is a there is a similarity between people who are driven apart by force, but in their hearts they would still like to come together. So yeah, and there have been things we hadn't noticed. And during the pandemic, I bring about this ethnic and the indigenous issues back at home. So there were things we hadn't noticed earlier, but during the pandemic, when everything else, all other distractions, when we went down to the village, all other distractions were not there. I and my family, we got to notice things that were there about these two beautiful people. So this is how I think, I don't know, I think I have been able to touch those topics, touch those points I wanted to. And once this project is out and we are allowed to share our stories, I think only then I will know whether my story has actually been able to touch those issues back at home to the people who are my story.
I think it very much has. And don't worry, because the humor is very much there, lurking somewhere in the background in the way that the young boy sings and dances. And so your touch of humor is very much there. Soumya, let me turn to you and your piece, and how did you come upon choosing that?
So like I said, since I was working in the newsroom and dealing with facts and numbers all day, I wanted to escape into fiction. So that's why I chose the medium. And I found that the pandemic had changed one very important thing about human beings. Humans, we don't give up on sick people. We don't give up on people who are ill, whether somebody is in a coma or somebody has a disability. We do our best to keep them going. But with the virus, I felt that we had lost, at least in the initial period, we had lost that sense of humanity where we started looking at people as criminals. If somebody tested positive, then there was this whole blame game going around. Why did you do that? And why were you so irresponsible? And so I wanted to bring that into my story, this sense of guilt that many people were forced to live with, though they may not have intention, it might not have been their intention to infect someone. That happens. And then when the consequences are so heavy to bear, what does that do to relationships? So I wanted to explore that. And I particularly made my characters, people in their 50s, because I felt that for the elderly to cope with this pandemic was especially difficult. Many of them are not as attuned to technology as the younger generation is. For many of us, this was an opportunity to watch Netflix along with work. Whereas for elderly people, they really struggled with their loneliness, the inability to communicate. And when everything around you has come to a standstill, what do you talk about? What kind of conversation happens at home? So I wanted to explore that within a marriage that is already not in the best place. So what happens when it is stressed even more due to the external circumstances? So these are multiple things that I observed during the pandemic, things in my family, things that I read about, and I wanted to capture all of that in the story.
Thank you for that lovely explanation. So we have about another 10 minutes left. And I wanted to ask if you had any questions to put to each other about the pieces. And so I'm going to turn it over to you in whichever order, if you would like to ask your colleagues a question or two about their pieces. And if then we have time, I will have a last question to put to you. So does anyone, yes, Shumana? Yeah.
My question will be to Benjamin, but I wanted to share a few things about the other essays. First to Nikhil, these are just observations as a reader. They are not questions. You know, Nikhil, I don't know whether, I don't want to say this because your essay made me cry. So, you know, writing, beginning with Emily Dickinson, almost 150 years after she had written, and her life, you know, I teach literature in a liberal arts college, and students don't want to read Emily Dickinson. And for you as a writer who's successful in the mainstream, to turn to this person who lived such a solitary life, to pick up a line from her poem and to change feathers into, I get goosebumps now, to change feathers into breath, beginning the essay and ending the essay at the same place, giving it, you know, that kind of cyclical or chiasma structure. That is what life has become, a kind of cycle, this wheel going on. And the form that you chose, you know, putting facts together. So it's like the spokes in a wheel. So all of that coming together, it was so beautiful. I'm sorry that I read it only this morning. I'm going to share it with my mother right after this. Soumya, I'm sorry again, I'm reading your writing for the first time, and I'm envious of your talent about how you write generations, how you use language to communicate the difference in which generations speak. I enjoyed reading it so much. Rashmi, I wanted to ask you that word, I am in Shiliguri, which is very close to where you are. So is that the word, that word beginning with D, is that the fiddlehead fawn?
Sorry, the word beginning with D.
D, yeah. So is it a kind of greens that did you mean? We call it dheki shag in Bangla. Is that the one you meant? Oh, yeah.
Dhekya.
Okay.
It's a fern. It's a fern because its tendrils curled.
Yeah.
And that's a delicacy.
Yeah, same here. I like it very much.
Thank you so much.
Benjamin, I wanted to ask, so this is my question. You began with the word cancel. And I thought very telling because we are living through a time of cancel culture. And the fact that you kind of displace the word from this environment of, you know, social media through which it has come to us, to this situation that we are in. I thought that was so brilliant. How did that come to you?
വളരെ സന്തോഷമുണ്ട് ആ ചോദ്യത്തിന്. തീർച്ചയായിട്ടും നമ്മൾ ഇങ്ങനെ റൂമിനുള്ളിൽ അടച്ചിരിക്കുകയാണ് എങ്കിൽ പോലും നമ്മൾ നിരന്തരം ലോകത്തെ കാണുകയും ലോകത്തെ നിരീക്ഷിക്കുകയും സമൂഹത്തെ കാണുകയും ഒക്കെ ചെയ്തുകൊണ്ടിരിക്കുകയാണ്. സ്വാഭാവികമായിട്ടും നമ്മുടെ ഉള്ളിലേക്ക് പലതരത്തിലുള്ള ചിന്തകൾ കടന്നു വരും. എങ്ങനെയാണ് ഈ ലോകം വളരെ കുറച്ച് ദിവസങ്ങൾ കൊണ്ട് മാറിക്കൊണ്ടേയിരിക്കുന്നത്? നിരന്തരം പുതിയ ആശയങ്ങൾ കൊണ്ട് ഓരോ അനുഭവങ്ങളും നമ്മളെ പുതിയ ഒരു പാഠത്തിലേക്ക് എത്തിക്കുന്നു എന്ന് നമ്മൾ നിരന്തരം വീക്ഷിച്ചുകൊണ്ടേയിരിക്കുകയാണ്. അപ്പോഴാണ് നിരന്തരം ഈ ക്യാൻസൽ എന്ന് പറയുന്ന ഒന്ന് നമ്മുടെ മുന്നിലേക്ക് വരുന്നു. വിമാനങ്ങൾ ക്യാൻസൽ ചെയ്യുന്നു, മീറ്റിങ്ങുകൾ ക്യാൻസൽ ചെയ്യുന്നു, അല്ലെങ്കിൽ തീവണ്ടികൾ ക്യാൻസൽ ചെയ്യുന്നു. അങ്ങനെ എല്ലാം ക്യാൻസൽ ചെയ്യുന്ന സമയത്തും യഥാർത്ഥത്തിൽ നമ്മൾ പുതിയൊരു പാഠം പഠിച്ചുകൊണ്ടേയിരിക്കുകയായിരുന്നു എന്നാണ് എനിക്ക് ഈ ലോകത്തെ വീക്ഷിച്ചുകൊണ്ടിരുന്നപ്പോൾ അല്ലെങ്കിൽ ലോകത്തെ നിരീക്ഷിച്ചുകൊണ്ടിരുന്നപ്പോൾ മനസ്സിലായ ഒരു കാര്യം. കാരണം നമ്മൾ എന്തുമാത്രം ധൃതിയിലാണ് ഓടിക്കൊണ്ടിരുന്നത്. നമുക്കൊന്നിനും സമയമുണ്ടായിരുന്നില്ല. പക്ഷെ അതൊന്നും ആവശ്യമുണ്ടായിരുന്നില്ല എന്ന്, അല്ലെങ്കിൽ നമ്മൾക്ക് ഞാൻ മുമ്പേ സൂചിപ്പിച്ചതുപോലെ ഇത്രയും വിവാഹത്തിന് ഇത്രയും ആൾക്കൂട്ടങ്ങൾ ആവശ്യമില്ലെന്ന്, മരണത്തിൽ ഇത്രയും വലിയ ബഹളങ്ങൾ ആവശ്യമില്ല എന്ന്, മീറ്റിങ്ങുകൾക്ക് വേണ്ടി നമ്മൾ ഇത്രയും ദൂരം ഓടേണ്ടതില്ല എന്ന്, അങ്ങനെ നമ്മളെ പുതിയ പാഠങ്ങൾ പഠിപ്പിക്കുന്നു എന്ന് നമ്മുടെ ചുറ്റുപാടും നിരന്തരം നിരീക്ഷിക്കുന്നതിൽ നിന്നാണ് ഞാനത് മനസ്സിലാക്കിയത്. വളരെ സന്തോഷം, അത് ഇഷ്ടമായി എന്ന്.
So he's very happy about that you asked the question. So in this time, and when he was shut in the room, and he was saying that he constantly kept observing the world, how the society is changing, how every moment is being changed, and every moment has its themes which are changing along with it. And in that, he observed how trains were cancelled, airplanes were cancelled, meetings were cancelled. And by observing all of this, he said that it was basically teaching us all lessons, all these cancellations. How, as he mentioned earlier also, how weddings did not require such a crowd, why funerals did not need to have such a, such a huge crowd and noise about funerals, how you needn't travel so much to attend a meeting. Basically, this taught us that things are possible in a better way. It taught us lessons.
Thanks, Meera. Okay, so any other closing remarks from the three of you? Soumya, Rashmi, Nikhil?
Let me ask one question to Nikhil.
Okay, sure.
Okay, Nikhil, you have shared so many experience in your article. It is wonderful, as Soumya told. And we met so many great persons like Manoj Gupta, Ravi Agarwal, Dr. Rajendra. And let us see about Second World War. We got so many great book or cinemas from real life incidents. Do you have any idea about these things? If you elaborate these things into a novel or into a fiction, you will get a better fiction and a great Indian fiction in this experience. Do you have any idea about to write about as a cinema or as a novel or anything from this experience? If you elaborate or collect so many experience from other part of India, you will get a great novel, I think so. Do you have anything, please?
So, yeah, I mean, definitely. So, as I said initially that, after doing 4 books, it was serendipity that, my third book, fourth book, they got adapted as a web and a film, and I started writing them. So I got very hooked with cinema. So now when I write anything, it unintentionally comes to me that I start seeing cinema in every single story, and the grammar of writing has changed. So when I was reading about these stories, I mean, you're very true that it looked like all of these stories like a Schindler List. It doesn't need you to save millions of people or thousands of people. Even if you save one life, it is as magnanimous, it is as big as doing such a great job. So I was very, very touched with all these stories, and I was thinking that these must come on cinema, probably a documentary or a mock, or it could be a web series also. And I thought that world must know about these stories. These are so beautiful people they are so selfless, so full of empathy. So I was, very, very fascinated and touched. And I hope probably someone, or probably I will document these stories in far more detail so that the world knows about the hope that lives in us. I keep writing, my favorite line that's probably written in some story. In Hindi, we say, "Ummeed ek zinda shabd hai." So I try to, use that line in my essay, that hope is a world that lives, that breathes, and there is a beauty in that particular world, as Sumana was also pointing out. So in fact, all of us, when I was reading everyone's piece, and I could clearly see that all of us were talking about hope. Benjamin has been, you also have written in one of the essays that I want to thank Corona for coming late. So writers, all of us are, romantic fools. We're thanking Corona. We are talking about hope. And it was lovely to read all of you. And during these times, we talk about love and hope. So it was lovely to interact and read all of your pieces.
Thanks so much, Nikhil. Thank you. And Soumya, Rashmi, would you like to add anything?
Yeah.
Okay, Rashmi, go ahead.
Soumya, please.
Okay. I just have an observation to make about all of the pieces. I was really struck by how everybody's piece had a contrast or a contradiction in it. Rashmi's is about healing past wounds, even as the world is, struck by a terrible illness. I found that to be a really interesting contradiction. I don't know if you thought of it that way, but that's how it, that's what I took away from it. And Sumana, I love the idea of a tree growing in a classroom. It's such a desolate image, but it's also hopeful because it's a tree and it's life-giving. So that image really stayed with me. And Benjamin's piece, I've read your novels, so I'm a fan of your writing already. But this piece, I really enjoyed reading what you said about the things that we don't need at a time when everybody was in need. So that I think you need a writer's perspective to bring that kind of interesting insight, into the picture. And for Nikhil, like you said, the stories are so realistic. They are all things that happened in real life, but they look so cinematic and so dramatic and filmy. Like you said, if I watch this in a film, I would wonder if people are capable of doing such things in everyday life. Somebody driving thousands of kilometers to help a friend out. So I found all of these contrasts and contradictions really interesting in all the pieces. When I was given this theme of Renaissance, I really wondered, it's such a broad theme. So what do you do with it? And it's been wonderful to see what everyone has come up with. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Soumya. Rashmi, go ahead.
Everything has actually been summed up so well, and everything has already been said. So I just need to say that if any vaccine would ever require any literary percentage in it, I think we would have done a wonderful job, and we wouldn't have waited for gaps, and we wouldn't have waited for the vaccines to be available. We would have just been out there and at least tried to save so many people with literary vaccines, very honestly speaking. Because that's what I got to read from all the pieces, Benjamin, Soumya, Nikhil, and Sumana, and so many other pieces I have been reading all these days. So I think had vaccines also taken some percentage of literature into it, I think we all would have done wonderfully. Thank you so much. It was overwhelming. Thank you.
Thank you all very much, Nikhil, Rashmi, Benjamin, Soumya, Sumana, and Meera, and the Japan Foundation. Thank you. I'm not going to ask you my last question because you have actually already answered it, except to say that your work is now going to travel to a completely different geographical, cultural space, but I'm sure that it will speak to people, even though in a different language, through so much of what you're saying, and it will resonate with them. So thank you for taking part in this project. And thank you to the Japan Foundation for actually providing a space where all the writers who have written this could meet each other and also read each other's works. Thanks once again to all of you.